Hello and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I'm curious about AI. And much of what we do in this podcast is thinking about and exploring the future, about the potential for AI, good and bad. Today, however, we are going to ground ourselves very much in the present, in what's happening right now. And one of the most immediate use cases of AI is in marketing. People are using it. It's not something speculative. It is being used right now. It is changing workflows, cutting costs, all that good stuff. And we've covered AI in marketing in small bites on this podcast before. But today we're going in for a full meal, a full entree. I really wanted a proper deep dive given how widespread this use case is. And there's no one really better to guide us through the world of AI in marketing than our guest today, David Berkowitz, founder of the AI Marketers Guild. Now, David has been a respected voice in marketing for over 20 years. He's spoken at more than 400 events worldwide. And in 2023, he founded the AI Marketers Guild. There are already thousands of members, including over 1,000 marketers that are active on a Slack channel. And they're all talking and chattering about how they are using AI, about what excites them, what frustrates them, what are the use cases that are most compelling, what's most useful, what seems like a good idea, but it's kind of hypey and doesn't really work. So what I love about this is not just one person's opinion on AI. It's someone who is deeply immersed in a community of thousands and every day hearing about these marketers, hearing what they care about. And so David's kind of a one-man cheat sheet into the world of AI and marketing. And we get into all of this stuff of what are marketers actually using it for? What are the most common use cases? What are the main tools they're using? And we do go deep too in something I've been very curious about, which is, okay, often it sounds great in theory. Yeah, wave a AI, flavored wands and voila, there's productivity gains. But in reality, when push comes to shove, okay, so how do you change your actual reporting structure? Or how do you, go into your spreadsheets and databases and somehow use AI to gain an edge? We kind of connect the dots from the abstract theory into how folks are actually using it. And we cover the concerns, the risks, the ways that AI can go sideways at times. We get into all of that stuff too. It's basically a conversation about marketing, but also I think folks in different verticals, if you will, whether from engineering to web development. I think there's a lot of lessons here about how folks are using AI that are translatable to other fields as well. So with that, hope you enjoy my conversation with David Berkowitz, founder of the AI Marketers Guild. David, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So every industry is sort of viewing AI with a mix of excitement and concern. And I feel like different industries have different mixes and ratio of that. How would you describe in general how marketers are viewing AI? What's the temperature? Is it generally with excitement or is it with trepidation?
Well, I think anyone who's really following this has to have a lot of both. And I often start my talks that I wind up giving on AI and marketing with an image of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, and where he's asking Frodo, "Are you frightened? You're not nearly frightened enough," because just the deeper you dive into this, the greater the implications have, and also if you're a marketer, then you can't separate what you're doing from your in your day job from broader cultural implications. Like this is something right now, we're in an election year, and so people are using AI to spoof presidential candidates. Right? Like this is so the idea of something like this going awry, it's already happening, and so you've got to be on the defensive. On the other hand, I've also never seen adoption like this in a professional context, especially as soon as ChatGPT hit. It was like, oh wait, I could use this myself. Like not only should I pay attention to this, I can do something with it right now, and I don't even need a bunch of followers, and I don't need to go and like share something publicly. I don't need any new hardware. I can just do this now. And those who are a little savvier with all this, or will take advantage of that opportunity, and they have. And then the learning curve from trying to just essentially futz around with this stuff, and then trying to see like, wait, well, how could this apply to my own workflow, my own org, my own output? Like it's way shorter than I've seen for really any other technology.
There's so many avenues that we'll explore there. I love that. Also, anytime we start with an Aragorn reference, I'm excited. That's a strong start for my. It's checking all my nerd boxes. I love it. Before we go there, for some quick context for listeners, tell us a bit about the AI Marketers Guild. When did you start it? What's its mission? How many members do you have? All that good stuff.
Yeah, well, I started it in the summer of 2023, and it's been this great build since then over the past year. And now, granted, I've been building community for in a formal context for 6 years when I launched AI Marketers Guild back in 2018, and continue to build that in a great way for marketers to connect with each other. And I was actually going to do way more with that at the start of last year. And then I was like, well, there's this white space in AI. There wasn't really a space for marketers to connect with each other, especially just waiving like a lot of the overhead and membership fees and like barriers that come with other. I mean, there are amazing organizations tackling this, but how can you have not just major brands and agencies take part, but also like connect with just these like breakthrough startup founders, people who are just like consulting and educating the space, and others who are involved. Like there's some wonderful lawyers in the community helping make sense of things. So anyone who's trying to build this out and learn from each other, the breadth of voices and the depth of them, it's just been tremendous. And so we've got more than 1,000 members active in the Slack community. We've got thousands more who are on the newsletters, who are subscribed to our event list. We do virtual events every week. We'll do periodic in-person ones too, starting in New York. But they're just like all these hooks where we're able to get members involved and hear what they're doing.
One reason I'm excited to talk to you, David, is given that you are entrenched in this community and cultivating this community, you're actually hearing what people are really talking about. You're not someone who's kind of speculating on 5 ways that AI can be useful in marketing. You're hearing from literally thousands of marketers about how they're applying it in their companies or how they want to apply it. So what are some of the most recurring topics or use cases or conversations that you're seeing whether in the Slack room or in physical meetups? Like what are kind of the burning issues that tend to come up again and again for these thousands of marketers?
Well, I'd say right now, it's fun to call any period a transition period, because I feel like there's like macro and micro transitions, and everything in this space is evolving so quickly. But one of the areas that we're focusing on a lot is because we did a member survey and had more than 100 members respond to how they're using AI and how they're thinking about this stuff. So we're actually capturing some of this information formally, and we've seen how some things you'd expect in terms of a lot more focus on content marketing right now, and so that's been most immediately applicable.
And just to jump in quickly, by content marketing, do you mean, just to clarify, having AI assist in the creation of content? So to be very
Exactly.
explicit, traditionally you might have a blog for a client. So maybe if it's a wealth management firm, as one way of marketing and showing their expertise, the wealth management firm would have a blog about hottest, latest topics in the world of wealth management. And the
Mhm.
thinking is that will be a platform for credibility, and that will be a soft way to bolster your brand. And historically, you pay a writer like me, frankly, in the past, actual writers to do this. And
Yep.
marketers now are like, hey, you know what? AI can actually be pretty smart about wealth management. And you can say, AI, brainstorm 20 blog posts for me, and now write these, please. So is that what you mean by content marketing and how it's being used?
Yeah, and some of it can even be creating an image for these kinds of posts. Some of this can be coming up with your content calendar to begin with and saying like, so I want to do 2 posts a week or 5 posts, or I or take this article that perhaps in some quaint nostalgic way a human actually wrote, and can you just give me some good copy to share this on LinkedIn for a corporate LinkedIn page, or for the CEO to be able to share themselves from their LinkedIn page. So there are all these aspects where it could fit in with that content marketing flow. But yeah, that's the general idea.
Thanks. That's one of the main buckets is content marketing. What else are people excited about and chattering about?
Well, I think what's coming up fast on its heels is trying to see how to best use these Gen AI platforms and some of these emerging tools on the data analysis front. And so if you're uploading a large volume of data, can you understand some trends from this? Can you even derive some insights? Like, can you start asking why something is happening? And so maybe that you see something spike on Wednesdays that you weren't expecting, and start asking, well, like, is there something, or is there like a large number of orders coming in, but the average order size is actually dropping, and that there, and that you discover, well, it's actually based on when new episodes of a certain TV show come out, and people are just flocking to this, but they're not your target customers, so they're just like buying a bit of merch, and then that's it. So there are all these things that might not be immediately apparent, or might take an analyst weeks to figure out, or it might even give you a kind of like a first round defense, say before you even hand something off to an analyst, if you're, say, just in more general management or brand manager, or it's just not your immediate area of expertise. Then you could start going in and having that conversation and say, well, like, okay, now you hand it off to the subject matter expert, but you're way better informed, and this is where like having that collaboration, right? Like where the tech becomes this partner of yours becomes really exciting, and it's just something that, like, most of us have not had anything like this kind of access to before.
Absolutely. And not to dive too deep down this one particular rabbit hole, but I'm personally interested in this. And then for years, I actually worked, while writing books, I also worked in customer segmentation marketing, doing data analysis stuff for Scholastic Publishing. And I spent years slicing and dicing databases, looking for trends, saying, oh, why is this demographic down 5% from last year? All that good stuff. It sounds like this is one area that's ripe for AI handling a lot of that low-hanging fruit. And follow-up question, is that true? And also, I guess, is that a concern for the folks who are doing those kinds of jobs of like database marketing analysis? Are they in a hot seat right now as far as AI doing some of the basic analysis and number crunching?
Well, it's opening up a lot of opportunities. I mean, where I feel some of your pain is, I was actually working nearly 10 years ago for a social listening, like social media analytics company. And right when I got there, I was coming in to head up the strategy team. And my first meeting with the sales team, I said, we've got to stop using the word insights. Like, our tech does not derive insights. If we're really good, we're handing it off to someone like Jeff, who can go and see some of these trends and see it laid out, and access a lot more information in a much cleaner interface that he can now say, aha, that's why this is happening. At the time it couldn't, and even then I knew something was going to happen where the tech would just keep getting bigger, and there were like literal rocket scientists out of India who through an acquisition had become part of the team. And so it's like I saw like just a thousand of what they were up to. It's like, oh wow, we can get way deeper here. So I knew at some point the tech would get there, because like, why not, right? And so this is where I think already the tech can do way more than what you're talking about. I mean, I was just one of our guests recently through the Guild's program was a company called Neuralift, and their founder John Mendez was showing how you can upload these massive data sets, I think of like millions of data points, and create segments that are named and described and have all these characteristics. And it's doing this stuff within a couple of hours right now, and I'm sure with him it's just a matter of time before it's a couple of minutes, right? Because all this stuff keeps getting faster. And there were a lot of people on the call who were like, well, like, how does this compare head to head against the analysts? And it feels a little bit about like the a folktale for a very different cultural reference of John Henry and racing the train, and it's like how long can we hold out? Like, at some point, John Henry's got to get some new skills, right? Because you're not stopping the train going cross country and changing commerce forever. But in the meantime, there's a lot as well. Like it's let's put it this way: like, it can at least pass a lot of sniff tests. Like, the tech out there, not just Neuralink, but in general, is at least good enough for that first pass. And if it's not there yet, like, the word "yet" is the most important word, and it's hard not to repeat it so much, because if you see something that isn't quite there today, like, then check in another week, another month, another few months, and if the company you're talking to hasn't figured it out, odds are someone else has made progress there.
Totally agree with that. I have a narrow question as a follow-up, which opens up to a wider question. Narrow question is, you alluded to data can be ingested and then analyzed by Gen AI to make to slice and dice and glean insights and or maybe they wouldn't call it insights, but to kind of label these customer segments and so on. What typically is the tool, the actual specific tool that's being used? Is this generally a ChatGPT or some app sitting on top ChatGPT, or is it a custom kind of bespoke interface that a company has built, or that a company hires an AI consultancy to build for them? And that kind of leads to my wider question, which is, I think a lot of folks, a lot of listeners to this podcast understand the potential in theory. And what you're saying is really resonating as, okay, I in theory can see how this could work, but they don't quite in practice get how to do it. Like, when the rubber hits the road, like, okay, cool. Like, how I have this, like, 27,000 row spreadsheet in Excel, or I have like the Weebus report cranks out something each week. And I don't really know how to translate the output of the Weebus report, for the fans out there, into AI magic. So if you can tackle that however you'd like, but the how typically is this being done? And then what are your thoughts on the overall bridging the theory and potential of AI to actual tools that make it happen?
So there are kind of a few levels of the answer to this question. And one is, for better and worse, we are not shockingly seeing this phase where it's like the rich get richer. And if you look at the rich, so you look at Gemini, Google, Meta, Amazon, probably like the four most important players right now, arguably in the as far as like developing and funding these language learning models and these platforms like OpenAI's ChatGPT and Perplexity and Anthropic's Claude. So if you're not using, say, Google Gemini directly or Microsoft Copilot, which just with the software update, there's a Copilot icon on my PC. It's increasingly hard to avoid. I'm sure that any minute now there's going to be a Gemini icon popping up in my Chrome browser, and then we'll see what like the Siri AI upgrades and everything that pop up on my phone. Like you won't be able to avoid this from all of the major players out there. But also, this tech, like I'm not a techie, so as soon as I drop a GitHub reference, which is like the main resource developers use for sharing code, for instance, then I'm instantly over my head. Even just say like the word GitHub should not come out of my mouth.
You and me both.
When you at least get a taste of what's going on there, you see that the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower, especially if you have a more specialized AI need that doesn't need to go and answer every question about everything that's ever been done and that everyone's ever said or thought of, but it just it's that very specific. It's like that needle nose plier, right? You're not going to use it every day, but damn, when you need it, it has a very specific job to do, and it does it very well. Right? It's not that hard to make a really solid needle nose plier.
So I think I 75% follow this thread, but to connect the dots, am I right in gathering that what you mean is you might start, to your point of rich getting richer, the foundation might start with an open AI or Gemini type tool, but then a company has their own kind of unique, and the fashionable word these days is bespoke operations and way of configuring data. So then the trick is to use your analogy, create this needle nose plier that sits on top of this kind of engine or foundation, to mix metaphors, of the open AI or Gemini tool. So then you're able, to bring us home for someone, actual employee, so that the analyst or marketing manager has this on their laptop, on their screen. They have this kind of interface that they can feed the data into, and then a beautiful pie chart spits out, which is powered by a mix of the open AI fueled foundation layer. And then someone has built the needle nose plier kind of bridge to help them do their own customized thing. Am I warm, or if I'm not, kind of guide me to the get there?
You're warm. And like, to give it another analogy, let's look at like the pre-AI space. Okay, say you're trying to advertise and reach a large number of households and consumers. Then you're probably going to start looking at Google and Meta, Facebook, right? You'll look at Amazon. Then there will be a few things that start coming up that then have an audience like you become really curious about, right? Like TikTok and Netflix rolls out an ad platform, and Spotify advertising, and they do mass reach. But there are millions of other places to reach consumers, and so maybe you need to reach a certain target, things like that. So, but your initial questions are, if you're starting to talk to a niche publisher, maybe even like someone who wants to potentially sponsor your podcast, it's like, well, what can they get out of sponsoring your podcast that they can't get out of advertising on LinkedIn, right? And so there's going to be that initial standard of like, what does the mass market look like? But in this case, because there's so many billions of dollars being poured in to the open AIs and other models out there, and because all of the major tech companies that we know of are investing so many billions of dollars into their own AI development, then a lot of that's going to be specialized too, in a way that there's going to be good layers of privacy protection. There are going to be things that you can customize. For instance, like a big concern that a lot of marketers have is they don't want to train AI models on their data and on their customers' data. Well, if you pay Google and ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Microsoft more money, then they'll say, we don't do that, right? We put a wall around your data, and you maybe do a little bit more homework to see if you can believe them. But presumably they're in pretty big trouble if they don't abide by that agreement, and maybe have a lawyer check it out and say, okay, right? But then for so many of your needs, like if you're trying to say handle audience segmentation and derive a lot of segments out of a lot of data, then presumably, yes, you can upload a lot to ChatGPT. You'll probably have to pay them a bit to give you like a large enough volume of so that you can analyze a lot of that data. But it's not going to be trained specifically to do that kind of job. And that's precisely why, like, even on the content marketing side, there are these tools like Jasper and Writer and things that like a lot of content marketers in my community and elsewhere swear by, where you can tell ChatGPT to write a blog post and even feed it some of the examples of things you've written, so it does so in your voice. But a tool that's only focused on writing content and that is getting better at that specific use case by the day might be well worth paying another $50 or $100 a month, or maybe more for an enterprise plan, because it's doing so much of like that main thing you really need to focus on.
Super helpful. Thank you for clarifying that. And since you mentioned Jasper and tools, one thing I'm curious about is, what are the most common tools you're seeing being used in your community? No free ads, but if you're willing to share names, what are the go-tos? What are maybe new and rising ones? Oh wow, recently we've seen this tool just skyrocket, or is it still mostly ChatGPT? What are folks using these days?
Well, I did ask in the first survey a couple of months ago what their favorite tools are, and I had folks pick one, and so about half or slightly more had actually said ChatGPT, and I included DALL-E 3, which is OpenAI's image creator that's built into ChatGPT. So if you just tell ChatGPT, go create an image for this LinkedIn post, it's going to use its DALL-E model.
And I use it all the time myself. So yeah,
it's great. So like the two combined, I mean, almost an unfair advantage, but it was also telling that in a community of all these AI geeks, I mean, you have a lot of like lay people too who aren't as deep in this, but in this kind of community, still, ChatGPT it blew everything else away. And when I asked the survey again, I actually want to shift it to asking like the top three or so and like see if there's like some rising thirds that come up there. But like for the language, for like the overall generic Swiss Army knife models, then ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini come up a lot. Then there's this really big layer of tools that and software companies that are incorporating AI in a meaningful way. Like I think what Canva's doing, for instance, for like the mass market for things like presentation building and removing backgrounds and other like image enhancements. They're using AI for this in very helpful ways that someone can use their $10 a month or so plan and get access to a lot of very sophisticated AI design tools. On the more sophisticated end, but not much more costly, you have what Adobe's doing across its suite, and especially with its Firefly AI products, just amazing, right? And how rich it is, and because Adobe is built from the ground up and for designers, and others in the visual arts and related fields, then they're going to go way deeper, right? It's like the difference between like a point and shoot and an SLR. So the SLR lover, especially the one who needs to use the manual features on that SLR camera, like they're going to then pay extra for Adobe and get more powerful AI tools to match. Across the board, like there are way too many, and I'll even say that on less like typically creative areas, like Apollo.io is a very popular prospecting tool on the sales side. So they've built AI into their flow. If you want to start generating personalized messages and some things that might kind of give people the willies a little bit in terms of like so great, it can like spit out 1,000 versions of this message and set up a 20-step drip campaign. You could do this way faster in a way to seem way more relevant than you could before. So there's that suite of like where they're using it. I mean, I love this whole crop of tools where where it's just like AI native companies, for instance. So one that I've been having fun with, for instance, and I have to stop saying playing around with, is Play.ai. I used Play.ai to create a voice clone of myself with a custom library of content from both. I used some professional materials like some collateral. I even uploaded my family recipe Google Doc to this. So if you ask how to make my grandmother's matzo ball soup, it should be able to give you a pretty credible answer. But you know, like there are things like this that are really wild, like great kind of showpieces. A company called HeyGen does this on the video front, for instance. You can use a video avatar or even a clone of yourself and maybe like field sales and marketing questions, or send out messages that you then personalize to different segments or different individuals. I mean, there's like mind-blowing stuff all over the place. A really practical one I love that comes up a fair amount is Opus.pro, a little less terrifying for many, where if you have, say, an hour-long podcast video, then you upload it to Opus and it will go and pull out different clips that you can instantly share across social channels. And it's going to tell you why it thinks that the clip about me talking about which AI tools to use is way better than the clip of me saying why AI is going to take someone's job, and maybe like, okay, it's just not as actionable. So share the tool recommendations instead.
That was a great rundown of tools. Thank you for that. David, what have you found AI to be surprisingly good at when it comes to marketing? And then what have you found AI to be surprisingly bad at still? Let's start with the good.
Okay, so for the good, I'd say taking a lot of information that it's like I'd say start with trying to think of what are your least favorite jobs to do, and can AI help them with. So, for instance, one of my least favorite jobs is writing proposals. So I created a custom GPT within ChatGPT that is private only to me, and that has my past proposals in there. And so if I say, write a proposal to Jeff, and so I want to go and generate exposure for Jeff within my community. And Jeff, I'm not really going to be hitting you up with this after the call, but I could do that pretty easily in my voice, and then even brainstorm on pricing with it and things like that I really don't want to, like, is this a $2,000? Is it $20,000? I don't know. I hate asking the Jeffs out there for money, but I want to price this stuff fairly. So
20K is not in the budget, just so you know. we'll 15, 19. We'll settle somewhere in there.
Great. Trying to passively aggressively go and build my business here, but so there are things like that where it's so helpful. Like I've done a number of market research interviews, for instance, with some like prospects and other experts in the space, where then I pull the transcripts in, like have an AI engine like Fireflies create the transcripts for me, which are amazingly accurate, and then pull out those kinds of highlights. But then I can have a conversation with an AI engine like ChatGPT or Claude and say, what do they have in common? Where do they differ? Can we like pull out a list? Can we say like, what are some of the market opportunities that were surfaced? How many of them mentioned this competitor? Like, is this something, right? And like, so I can start using all these things that I heard. And
David, did I hear you right that you are uploading transcripts of calls and then creating kind of this custom ChatGPT to be able to query and summarize across calls? Say, hey, I had these 20 conversations. What are kind of common threads to help you identify, so you can create some action that could be useful for like 17 out of its 20 calls. Am I getting that right? That's really freaking slick.
I mean, and I'll often do this specifically for certain elements of like market research projects or elements of other work I'm doing on the corporate marketing side. And so you don't even need a custom GPT for that element, although it helps if you have that repository. But you could just go and upload a few transcripts at once and say, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And really get to insights practically immediately. Yeah.
So smart. Sorry to cut you off. I was
very
impressed
that's great.
by that one.
Now, with where AI goes awry, it's wild to see. Like I mean, the number of times where I have to ask Google Gemini or Perplexity or any of these, like, wait, why did you tell me this? Right? Because I go and proved it wrong. Like I'm now editing a friend's book in the AI space, and I'm doing a lot of fact checking for it right now. And so when there's something that they reference a case study or a quote or something like that, so there was just an example the other day where said, did Microsoft CEO really say this? And so it's like, oh yeah, here it is. And here's even the source of the article. And I glanced at the article now. So really just trying to go and check the AI's work, which is always important. And the quote isn't in there, right? I Google I do a search on the page for the quote reference. It's just not there. And I'm like, where is it? They're like, oh yeah, that quote. No, but it sounds like something Satya Nadella would have said.
AI is a world-class bullshitter, like the best bullshitter the world has ever seen.
but aiming to please you. Right?
Aiming to please, exactly. It's a convincing one. A hyper-personalized. It's incredible how good it is at that.
So I mean, one of my favorite things was my partner, who's an actor, I uploaded part of a play that she was auditioning for to AI so I could have a conversation with it. And I was asking for a couple of characteristics about the two main characters. I was really excited. And then like the first line or two was like really good. And then it just starts saying, I'm like, fortunately, I read the play before uploading it. I was like, this is really off. And I realized that the play had such a long file name that it was making this up entirely based on the file name. And this was Claude, which is supposed to be one of the gold standards out there, right? Like being poured into this. And it was just bullshitting this based on a file name.
Incredible.
Right?
That's a great example. One thing, Dave, you mentioned earlier was concerns that marketers have, rightly so, about data integrity, data privacy. Can we trust these big tech companies to preserve client data? And obviously, if you're a marketer, you're in a tricky place, whether you're internal marketing for some company or a marketing consultancy or marketing firm that has external clients. Either way, obviously, the data is precious, sacred, all that stuff. That's clearly a concern. What other ethical or otherwise concerns are you seeing in your community about AI, and how are they kind of navigating those concerns?
Well, and on the privacy front, it's not just like, is this keeping this safe, but then increasingly, does this adhere to local laws? Does it adhere to international laws? This has got to be a bumper year for AI, for like privacy lawyers and others in that space, just try to make sense of all of these regulations and in the states, just that we have this like patchwork quilt with every state doing its own thing. I mean, it's like this can't go on indefinitely. We at least need to have our own answer to EU regulations and simplify things a little bit. There are so many questions with ethics that, first of all, how do you go and manage a workforce in an ethical way using AI, right? Like, is your starting point using AI for growth, or using AI with the goal of getting rid of as many humans as possible? And odds are, as we've seen at some companies like, say, the former Twitter, then when you get rid of too many people who know what they're doing, then a lot of things can go off the rails. But it's obviously very motivating to many in the C-suite. So there are ethical standards on that. There's a wonderful AI marketing ethics newsletter from a couple of members who are in the community, Christina Martin and Paul Cheney, and I actually asked them a pretty basic, like, innocuous question, because I often use AI to go and help me with recipes, and my daughter and I love cooking and baking together, and so with the best thing about AI for recipes, and it relates to things that we've discussed here today, is that it's not just, you don't just get some information, you can have a conversation. And so when I was using AI to try to help me cook pork belly for the first time, I'm like, well, do I need this step? Can I do it faster? Can I how else could I go about doing this? Is there, like, say I don't want to add sugar in my recipe, right? Like, you can't do that when you just go on a landing page. But when I was looking up the best chocolate chip cookie recipe, then I think of all the different other publishers who were cut out of the process, right? Like product manufacturers like Nestle or King Arthur baking bacon on the brain after the pork belly reference, whose content I might consume and whose products I might buy, and now who aren't featured there, right? Like the ads that are running on their pages, the ads that are running on Google, and so people might not lose much sleep over Google missing a few ad dollars, but if those ad dollars are helping sustain other publishers and keeping even just like local businesses afloat, then I was asking the marketing ethics folks, I'm like, was I unethical for going to ChatGPT and cutting out all these other players? And I mean, they were pretty lenient with me in this example, but there's so much for gray area. There's so many slippery slopes here, and you can't get around the fact that if millions of recipe seekers do what I did, then and recipe sites are a great example because most of them are terrible, right? Bombarded with ads, like just cramming things in. You can't even read the thing. You have to scroll down 20 pages. You have to spend 5 minutes before you even see the recipe there on the page, because they're just trying to game Google and ad networks and everything else. And so you might not even feel a lot of sympathy toward many of them, but still, like, this can affect people's lives. And a lot of them are folks like us who are also independent content creators. Like, what happens to us? It's scary.
Totally. And it's a great example. And you can easily imagine extrapolating and scaling that. And so for every recipe, there's things like sports. You want to know what happened to the game, and you ask AI to summarize this, and boom, ESPN has just been cut out, or smaller publications that cover the Athletic, New York Times. These are all cut out of the equation. So yeah, I agree. That's a deeply concerning problem. I don't think anyone has a good answer for yet. We can talk about that for 2 hours, I'm sure. Totally agree. As we wind down, David, what advice would you give to two different echelons of folks in marketing? I'd love your advice to someone listening to this podcast who's perhaps a marketing analyst, marketing manager, junior-ish or middle-ish in their career, they haven't yet really dug into AI. They're curious, they want to, not quite sure what to do. So advice to them, and then advice to a CMO or some marketing executive, or perhaps even a CEO, of how to, at a higher level, how to think about embracing and navigating AI in their company.
I'm actually going to give pretty similar advice to both cohorts and roles. And that is, first of all, you're already doing something right, not necessarily by listening to me, but by listening to this series here and tuning in. So that's already a really good sign, right? Like that the curious here are going to have a tremendous advantage. And the next step that's most important is don't just listen to this. It's that if whatever you think of me, like if I just said something here that you haven't done yet or seen yet or heard about, right? Like Google it or ChatGPT it, right? The Play.ai or Opus, like try one of these things yourself. Maybe it's something personal. Maybe you like recipes too, or maybe you're looking for like origami patterns or whatever it is. Well, how would AI handle something in real time, like sports scores? Yeah, and you haven't done that before. Try it, right? And so you see some guests on the show you hadn't heard of before. Well, follow them on LinkedIn or look on Instagram or wherever your favorite platforms are for consuming information. And so just the more you experience this stuff, then the fact that it is so tangible means that there's so much you can learn by actually doing, by broadening your horizons. And if there are vetted folks out there, whether it's someone like Jeff or admittedly, like I try to make sure that the people who are joining AI Marketers Guild are relevant to folks who add value for other members, then find whoever it is, whether your preference is YouTube or Slack or LinkedIn or like you'll be able to find tribes and content sources, and then just go and like spend even just 5 minutes after this and try something as soon as you're free. Ideally, just like tune out right now and multitask a little bit and do this. Like nothing beats that. And then whatever that application is, like then it's like, oh wait, well, how can I help me with my like quarterly business plan versus some data analysis? Well, if you are that data analyst, then try to do the thing that's most relevant to you, which might be anonymizing a small subset of the data you're working with, remove any personally identifiable information, assume the worst, like, don't put anything in an AI engine that you wouldn't say, like, getting out publicly on the internet, especially if you're using the free tools out there that haven't necessarily been vetted and have more lenient privacy policies, and just try it out and see what it says and come to your own conclusions.
A+++ advice. Love that. On a personal note, that's how I got started with myself. I was personally just playing around with ChatGPT, and that sparked some ideas. And next thing you know, I'm just addicted to doing this podcast and stuff. Last question for you. You already mentioned a few great examples of how you're using AI personally. Anything else you can share of ways you're using AI in your own life?
Well, I mean, one way I segment like AI is like what are the more mission critical needs that you have, and what are things that are more like workhorse, right? Like keep the lights on. And I think like there are plenty of like LinkedIn articles for a corporate page. Like it's just reminding followers you're out there, and so it's not necessarily going to make or break your business, but then then it's just going to get you further along and like again just like help keep things humming. Awesome, right? For things that are more.
And sorry, and just to clarify, that's what you use. AI is useful for that bucket of things.
AI is not just useful for it. That's where AI can often help like end to end, right? Like
Yeah.
the prompt, just give me something, and if it gets you 80% of there, like sometimes some of the things you need to do are not 100% important. For things that are really like you're going to have your clients go and see this and do this, then you need to make sure that even if you're using AI, that you are just like putting it through the ringer and making sure that what you're producing is not just as good as what you could have done separately, but even smarter than that, right? Like that there's some added value that came out of the fact that AI was able to go and influence this in some way, and so yeah. But it's still so important to always have those human checks to whatever you do.
Awesome. And actually, the real last question for you, most important one in a sense, where should listeners go to learn more about you and the AI Marketers Guild? Any websites and so on to plug?
Thanks. AIMarketersGuild.com. Always great to have more educated, curious folks like your audience involved. It's an easy way to join for free through the site. LinkedIn, I'm D Berkowitz, and usually pretty easy to find in platforms like that.
Amazing. David, thanks so much. I enjoyed it. Congrats on what you built. Very cool stuff.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to David Berkowitz, founder of the AI Marketers Guild. I should add that I was very excited to meet David through very good friend of the pod, Andrea Sertish, founder of Pregnantish. So Andrea, thanks for the connection. And thank you to you, dear listeners. Hope you enjoyed. As always, please consider subscribing, rate it 5 stars, forward it to your favorites, friends, partner, marketer, all that good stuff. Thanks again, and see you next time. Take care.